Death has a sound. Most people do not know this. Most people are fortunate enough to never learn. But those who work in the spaces between life and the grave, they know. They hear it in the silence that follows a final breath, in the stillness of a body that will never move again, in the absence of everything that makes us human. Death has a sound, and it is supposed to be silent, supposed to be final, supposed to be the end. This is case 13. The one that taught a paramedic that sometimes the dead refuse to stay quiet. Marcus Chen had been a paramedic for 8 years. 8 years of racing through city streets with sirens screaming. 8 years of performing CPR on kitchen floors and delivering babies in back alleys. 8 years of holding pressure on wounds that would not stop bleeding and whispering comfort to people taking their last breaths. He thought he had seen every variation of human suffering, every shade of death, every way a body could fail and a soul could depart. He was wrong. Oakland Memorial Hospital, San Francisco, California. January 23, 2019. 2:14 in the morning. The graveyard shift, they called it. The irony was not lost on Marcus as he wheeled the gurney down the basement corridor toward the morgue. Patient declared deceased at the scene. Elderly woman. Natural causes. No family to notify. No one waiting. No one who would remember her name 3 months from now. Just another lonely death in a city full of people. The morgue was located in the oldest part of the hospital, built in 1928, back when they did not worry about making death look pleasant. The corridor leading down was narrow. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, half of them flickering like dying fireflies. The walls were painted that institutional green that was supposed to be calming but instead felt like the color of nausea, like the color of things that should have been updated decades ago but were forgotten, left to decay in basements where the living tried not to go. Marcus had been to the morgue exactly 11 times in 8 years. Most paramedics dropped patients at the ER and let others handle the aftermath. But tonight was different. Tonight the ER was overflowing. A multi-car accident on the highway. Every available staff member pulled into trauma bays, operating rooms, wherever hands were needed to save the ones who could still be saved. So Marcus got the job no one wanted. Take the deceased to the morgue, sign the paperwork, get back to the ambulance and wait for the next call. Simple. Routine. Nothing to worry about. He pushed through the heavy metal door. The temperature dropped immediately. Morgues were kept cold. Preservation. Science. Nothing supernatural about it. Just refrigeration doing its job. But the cold that hit Marcus felt different. Deeper. Like it was seeping through his uniform and settling into his bones. Into his blood. Into places cold should not be able to reach. The main room was empty. Steel tables, drains in the floor, scales hanging from the ceiling like some macabre butcher shop. Everything scrubbed clean but carrying that smell. That distinct scent of formaldehyde and antiseptic and something underneath that no amount of cleaning could ever fully eliminate. The smell of death, of decomposition held at bay but never truly defeated. Just delayed. Marcus wheeled the gurney toward the cold storage units lining the far wall. Rows of metal doors, each one a temporary resting place for someone who used to be a person, used to have dreams and fears and favorite songs. Now reduced to a number on a toe tag and a space on a shelf in a refrigerated drawer. He tried not to think about it. Tried not to imagine his own eventual journey to a room like this. Tried to focus on the task, the paperwork, the procedures that made death manageable by making it bureaucratic. He positioned the gurney beside drawer 17, the one assigned to his patient. Jane Doe for now. No identification found. No one to call. No one to claim her. He reached for the door handle. Cold metal against his palm. And that is when he heard it. The sound that made every hair on his body stand at attention. The sound that made his hand freeze mid-reach. The sound that should not exist in a morgue at 2:14 in the morning with no one else present. Humming. Soft. Melodic. A woman's voice humming a tune he almost recognized. Something old. Something that felt like childhood even though he could not place it. Coming from inside the cold storage unit. From behind the metal door. From drawer 17. From a space that should contain only silence and the patient he had just brought down. The patient who had been deceased for 47 minutes. The patient whose chest no longer rose. whose heart no longer beat, whose brain no longer fired electrical impulses that could possibly produce sound. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still on the cold metal handle, his breath visible in the frigid air, his mind racing through rational explanations. A radio someone left on, a phone playing music, an acoustic trick, sound traveling from somewhere else in the hospital and echoing down through old pipes and making it seem like it was coming from inside the drawer. Any explanation, any reason, anything except the one his gut was screaming at him, anything except the impossible. The humming continued, steady, peaceful, almost happy. A lullaby for the dead sung by someone who should not be capable of song. Marcus released the handle, stepped back, his heart hammering against his ribs, his training evaporating like morning fog under harsh sunlight. He was no longer a paramedic with 8 years of experience. He was prey. And something in drawer 17 was making it very clear that in this space, the rules he thought he understood no longer applied. He should leave, should walk out, should report this to someone, anyone. But his feet would not move, his body refusing to obey the basic instinct to flee. Because somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the primal terror, there was something else. Curiosity, the need to know. The same impulse that makes people slow down at accident scenes. The same impulse that makes children peek under beds even when they are afraid of what they might find. The impulse that has led humans into danger since the beginning of time because not knowing is somehow worse than facing the truth. Marcus reached for the handle again, his hand trembling now. His breath coming in short gasps, the humming grew louder, more distinct, and now he recognized the tune. A lullaby his grandmother used to sing, a song he had not heard in 20 years, a melody that should exist only in his memories, not here, not now, not coming from behind a metal door in a hospital morgue in the early hours of a January morning. He pulled the handle, the door released with a hiss of cold air. The drawer slid open on well-oiled rails, and Marcus Chen looked inside at the woman he had brought down 47 minutes ago. The woman who had been checked and double-checked and certified, deceased by 2 separate medical professionals. The woman whose body temperature had already begun to drop, whose skin had already begun to take on that waxy quality that marks the transition from life to death. Her eyes were open, wide open, and they were looking directly at him, not through him, not past him, at him, into him. Seeing something he had kept hidden even from himself. And the humming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the impossible sound that had preceded it. Because in that silence, Marcus understood that he had not just stumbled onto something strange. He had walked into something that had been waiting specifically for him. Something that knew his name, knew his secrets, knew about the call 6 months ago that he tried every day to forget. She spoke. The deceased woman with no pulse and no brain activity, and no possible way to form words, spoke. Her voice dry like paper, crackling like dead leaves, but clear, crystal clear. And the words she said would haunt Marcus Chen for the rest of his life. You let me die, Marcus. You were 3 minutes late. 3 minutes. And I died alone on that floor waiting for you to save me. Do you remember? Do you remember what you were doing instead of answering my call? Marcus stumbled backward. His shoulder hit the metal table behind him. The clang echoed through the empty morgue like a church bell announcing judgment. His mind screamed rational explanations. Cadaveric spasm, trapped gases, post-mortem muscle contractions. All the medical phenomena that could make a body appear to move or make sound after death. But none of those explanations covered speech. None covered eyes that tracked movement. None covered the impossible knowledge of things this woman could not possibly know. 6 months ago, July 19th, 2:18 in the morning, a call came in. Elderly woman. Chest pain. Residential address in the Marina District. Marcus and his partner Jamie were 3 blocks away. Standard response time would have been 4 minutes. But Marcus had stopped, pulled the ambulance into a convenience store parking lot. Just 2 minutes, he said. Just need coffee. The overnight shifts were killing him. Just 2 minutes to grab caffeine and clear his head. Jamie protested, but Marcus was senior. Marcus made the call. 2 minutes became 3. 3 became 5. By the time they arrived at the address, the woman was unconscious. By the time they got her to the ER, she was gone. Massive heart attack. The doctor said even immediate response might not have saved her. Might not. Those were the words Marcus replayed every night when sleep would not come. Might not. But might have. Might have if he had not stopped for coffee. No one blamed him. The official report showed response time within acceptable parameters. No one knew about the coffee stop. No one except Jamie, who never mentioned it again. Never looked at Marcus differently. Never suggested that those 5 minutes mattered. But Marcus knew. Marcus carried it. And now, somehow, impossibly, the woman in drawer 17 knew too. How do you know about that? Marcus forced the words through a throat that felt like it was closing. How could you possibly know? The woman in the drawer smiled. Not a warm smile, not a human smile. Something that used facial muscles like an unfamiliar tool. This place remembers Marcus. Every death that passes through these doors. Every life that ends in these hallways. Every moment of hesitation. Every choice that tips the balance from survival to loss. It all soaks into the walls, into the floor, into the cold metal drawers where we wait. And some of us learn to listen. Marcus grabbed his radio, pressed the call button. Static. Nothing but static. He tried his cell phone. No signal. 4 bars when he entered the basement. Now nothing. As if the outside world had ceased to exist. As if the morgue had become its own dimension. Its own pocket of reality where normal rules dissolved like sugar in water. They cannot hear you down here. The woman's voice was almost gentle now. Almost compassionate. Not when the walls decide to close. Not when the dead have something to say. You should know this, Marcus. You have been coming here for years, dropping off the ones you could not save, the ones who died in your ambulance or before you arrived. Did you never wonder where they went? Did you never feel them watching as you filled out your paperwork and walked away? The temperature in the morgue dropped further. Marcus could see his breath forming clouds in the air. Frost began to creep across the metal surfaces, across the tables, across the floor. Delicate patterns like frozen spiderwebs spreading from drawer 17 outward, claiming territory, marking boundaries. Marcus tried to think. Tried to access the training that had carried him through 8 years of emergencies. Assess the situation, identify threats, formulate response. But every protocol he knew assumed a world that made sense. A world where the dead stayed dead. A world where morgues were just refrigerated storage and nothing more. This was not that world. What do you want? His voice steadier now. If this was happening, if this impossible nightmare was real, then he would face it the way he faced everything else. Head on, direct, no matter how terrifying. Want? The woman tilted her head. The movement too smooth, too fluid, like a puppet on strings manipulated by someone learning how joints worked. I want nothing, Marcus. I am just the messenger. The first one. The one who opens the door. There are others here who have been waiting for you, others who have questions, others who remember your face from the worst moments of their existence. Marcus heard it then. Other sounds, coming from the other drawers, soft at first, then growing louder, knocking, scratching, movement behind metal doors, like something waking up, like something becoming aware. Drawer 12 rattled. Drawer 23 began to slide open on its own. The sound of metal scraping against metal filling the morgue with a discordant symphony. No. Marcus backed toward the exit. This is not real. This is exhaustion, stress, a hallucination brought on by too many overnight shifts and not enough sleep. Is that what you tell yourself about the Marina District woman? The corpse in drawer 17 sat up, the sheet falling away, revealing the hospital gown, the toe tag. The pale skin marked with lividity where blood had pooled after her heart stopped. That she was just another call? Just another patient you could not save? That stopping for coffee was a reasonable decision made by a tired paramedic, and not the choice that cost a human being her final chance at survival? Drawer 23 slid fully open. A hand emerged. Gray. Lifeless. But moving. Gripping the edge of the drawer. Pulling. A man sat up. Middle-aged. Trauma victim. Marcus remembered him. 2 months ago. Car accident. Internal bleeding. Died before they reached the hospital. Marcus had performed CPR for 20 minutes. Had done everything right. had followed every protocol. It had not been enough. You broke 3 of my ribs during compressions. The dead man's voice was hollow, empty, an echo of something that used to be human. Cracked them trying to restart a heart that was already too damaged. I felt it, even as I was dying. I felt you breaking me. Felt your hands on my chest. Felt the desperation in every compression. But Marcus, I was already gone. And you knew it. You knew I was gone, but you kept trying because you could not accept another failure. Could not add another face to the collection you see when you close your eyes. More drawers began to open. 5, 8, 12, bodies sitting up, standing, stepping out onto the frozen floor with movements that should not be possible. All of them looking at Marcus. All of them with that same awareness, that same impossible knowledge. All of them faces he recognized. Faces from calls over 8 years. The ones he lost. The ones he could not save. The ones who died despite his training and his effort and his desperate refusal to accept that death sometimes wins no matter what you do. They moved toward him. Slow, deliberate, not threatening, not aggressive, just approaching. Like they had been waiting for this moment, for this confrontation, for the chance to finally speak to the man who had been there at the end, the man who had held their hands or performed compressions or whispered comfort as their lives slipped away, the man who carried them all like stones in his pockets, getting heavier with each passing year, each passing call, each passing death. Marcus's back hit the exit door. His hand found the handle, turned it, locked. The door that should never be locked from the inside was locked, trapping him with the impossible, with the dead who refused to stay silent, with the guilt he thought he had buried beneath professionalism and procedure and the necessary emotional distance that keeps paramedics functional. The first woman spoke again. "We are not here to punish you, Marcus. We are here to show you something you need to understand before the weight of us crushes you completely, before the guilt turns you into another casualty, before you make a choice you cannot take back." Marcus pressed his back against the locked door. 12 bodies now surrounded him in a loose semicircle. 12 faces he saw in nightmares. 12 people who had died despite everything he knew, despite everything he tried, despite the oath he took to save lives no matter what. They stood silent, waiting, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Not anger, not hatred. Something worse. Understanding. Like they could see straight through his uniform and his training and his carefully constructed walls into the raw fear and guilt that lived in his core. "What do you want to show me?" Marcus's voice cracked, the professional composure he wore like armor finally shattering. "What could you possibly show me that I do not already see every time I close my eyes? I remember all of you, every single one. Your names, your faces, the exact moment when I knew you were gone. I carry that. I live with that. What more do you want from me?" The woman from drawer 17 stepped closer. Her bare feet made no sound on the frozen floor. "Show him," she said to the others. "Show him what he refuses to see." The man with the broken ribs moved forward, placed his cold hand on Marcus's chest, right over his heart. The touch burned like ice, like frostbite setting in instantly. Marcus tried to pull away, but his body would not respond, would not obey. Frozen in place by something beyond his control, beyond his understanding. Images flooded his mind. The car accident scene, the twisted metal, the blood. But now he saw it differently. Saw what he had missed in the moment. Saw the man's injuries, the internal damage, the steering column that had crushed organs beyond repair. Saw the timeline. The man had been dying from the instant of impact. 3 minutes before Marcus even received the call. Nothing anyone could have done. Not the fastest response time, not the most skilled surgeon, not divine intervention itself. Death had claimed him in that first moment of collision. Everything after was just the body taking time to catch up with the inevitable. "I was already gone," the man said softly. "Before you arrived, before you started compressions, before you broke my ribs trying to save me. You did not fail me, Marcus. You fought for someone who was already lost. And that is not failure. That is honor. Another body approached, an elderly man. Marcus remembered him from 4 years ago, stroke patient, unresponsive when they arrived, died in the ambulance despite aggressive intervention. The man touched Marcus's arm. Another surge of images, the stroke happening hours before the call. Brain tissue dying, damage spreading. By the time anyone found him, by the time anyone called for help, the window for survival had already closed. Marcus had responded in 6 minutes, world-class time. But the man had needed help 6 hours earlier, and no one had been there. No one had known. By the time Marcus arrived, he was fighting against hours of damage, fighting a battle that had been lost before it began. "You were not late," the elderly man whispered. "I was already dying when my neighbor finally heard me fall. You gave me comfort in my final moments. You held my hand. You told me I was not alone." And Marcus, for someone dying far from family, far from anyone who loved them, that gift was everything. More came forward, each one touching him, each one flooding his mind with truth he had been too consumed with guilt to see. The young woman who overdosed, already brain dead from lack of oxygen before the call came in. The construction worker who fell from scaffolding, spinal cord severed instantly. The child who drowned, underwater too long. Every single one showing him the same thing. The same truth he had refused to accept, that he was not God, that he could not reverse time, that medicine had limits, that some deaths happened in the seconds or minutes or hours before he even knew someone needed help. And arriving after death had already won did not make him responsible for the loss. "Stop!" Tears streamed down Marcus's face. "Please stop." "We cannot stop," the woman from drawer 17 said. "Not until you understand. Not until you see what we see. You have been carrying us like we are proof of your failure. But Marcus, we are proof of your dedication. Proof that you tried. Proof that even when the outcome was inevitable, you fought anyway. You gave everything you had. And sometimes, that has to be enough." The morgue began to change. The walls seemed to dissolve. Marcus could see through them now, see into other rooms, other moments. He saw himself at accident scenes, in living rooms, on street corners. Saw himself performing CPR on people who would survive. Saw himself delivering babies. Saw himself stopping bleeding. Saw himself pulling people back from the edge. Dozens of them. Hundreds. 8 years of saves he barely remembered because the losses screamed so much louder. "Do you see?" The woman's voice was gentle now, almost maternal. "For every one of us you could not save, there are 10 who went home because of you. 20 who got to see another sunrise. 30 who got to hold their children again. But you only count us. Only remember the faces of the lost. And Marcus, that is killing you faster than any disease, faster than any injury. You are dying of guilt for deaths that were never yours to prevent." Marcus slid down the door, knees giving out. 8 years of accumulated grief pouring out in sobs that shook his entire body. "I should have been faster, should have been better, should have known more, should have done more." No. All 12 voices spoke in unison. "You should have been human. You should have accepted that being human means having limits. Means being 3 minutes late sometimes because you needed coffee to stay awake and functional for the next call. Means breaking ribs trying to save someone because you refuse to give up. Means carrying grief because you care deeply about every life you touch. That is not weakness, Marcus. That is what makes you extraordinary." The man with the broken ribs knelt beside him. "I have a question for you, and I need you to answer honestly. If you could go back, if you could change that night, would you have skipped the coffee? Arrived 3 minutes earlier to my call?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, of course." "And what would have happened on your next call? The one that came 20 minutes later? The teenager having an asthma attack? Would you have been alert enough? Focused enough? Or would your exhaustion have caused you to miss something? To make a real mistake that cost a life that could have been saved?" Marcus froze. He had never thought about it that way. Never considered that taking care of himself might have saved someone else later in the shift. Never calculated that those 3 minutes of delay on a call that was already lost might have bought clarity and focus for a call that could still be won. "You cannot save everyone," the woman from drawer 17 said. "No one can. And the guilt you carry from accepting that truth is heavier than any body you will ever load into these drawers. We came back tonight. We rose from our rest, not to haunt you, not to accuse you, but to release you, to tell you that we do not blame you, that we never did, that the only person who has not forgiven Marcus Chen for being human is Marcus Chen himself. The 12 bodies began to fade, growing translucent, growing lighter, the temperature in the morgue slowly rising, the frost melting from the metal surfaces. The door behind Marcus clicked. Unlocked now. Free to open. Free to let him leave. But before they disappeared completely, before they returned to wherever the dead go when they finally rest, the woman spoke one last time. Go home, Marcus. Sleep. And tomorrow, when you wake up and put on that uniform and answer that first call, remember us. Remember that we are grateful. Remember that you tried. And remember that being a paramedic does not mean preventing every death. It means showing up anyway. It means trying anyway. It means caring anyway, even when you know the outcome, even when you cannot win. You show up, and that is the miracle. Marcus sat on the cold floor of the morgue for what felt like hours. But when he checked his watch, only 8 minutes had passed since he entered. 8 minutes. Not the eternity it felt like. Not the lifetime of confrontation and revelation, and 12 dead bodies speaking truth. 8 minutes. Something was wrong with that math. Something did not add up. He stood slowly, his legs shaky, his uniform soaked with sweat despite the cold. He looked around the morgue. All the drawers were closed, every single one, including drawer 17. The one that had started everything. The one where the woman with impossible knowledge had sat up and spoken his name. He walked to it, hand trembling as he reached for the handle, pulled it open. The drawer slid out smoothly. Empty, completely empty. No body, no sheet, no toe tag, nothing. Marcus stumbled to drawer 23, the man with the broken ribs, pulled it open, empty. Drawer 12, empty. Every drawer he opened revealed the same thing. Nothing, no bodies. No deceased patients waiting for processing. The morgue was empty, had been empty, the entire time. His radio crackled to life. Unit 7, what is your status? You have been off comms for 9 minutes. Confirm location. Jamie's voice. Clear, concerned, normal. Marcus grabbed his radio with shaking hands. Unit 7, I am at the morgue. I was bringing down a patient. Jane Doe, elderly female. Where is she? Silence on the other end. Then Jamie's voice again, confused. Marcus, what are you talking about? We did not transport any deceased tonight. Our last call was the cardiac arrest on 5th Street. Patient survived. We cleared from the ER 40 minutes ago. You said you were going to grab coffee from the basement vending machines. Are you okay? The world tilted sideways. Marcus looked at the gurney he had wheeled down. Empty. No body bag, no patient. Just an empty gurney he apparently pulled from the ambulance and wheeled down to the basement for no reason. He ran to the sign-in sheet by the door. The clipboard where all morgue deliveries were logged. Checked the entries. Nothing. No signature from him, no Jane Doe, no delivery at all. The last entry was from 6 hours earlier. I am fine. Marcus forced the words out. I will be right up. He left the morgue, walked back down the green corridor. The fluorescent lights were not flickering anymore. Or maybe they never had been. Maybe his exhausted mind had turned stable lights into flickering ones, had turned empty drawers into occupied ones, had turned 8 minutes of standing alone in a cold room into an elaborate confrontation with 12 dead patients who existed only in his guilt-soaked memory. Marcus took the stairs instead of the elevator. Needed the movement. Needed the physical reality of climbing. Each step real. Each breath real. Each heartbeat real. Not supernatural. Not impossible. Just a man climbing stairs in a hospital at 2:22 in the morning. He reached the main floor, found the bathroom, looked at himself in the mirror. His face was pale, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, hair disheveled. The face of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. Months, years maybe. He had been awake for 31 hours. This was his 4th overnight shift in 6 days. He was running on caffeine and adrenaline and the desperate need to prove something to himself. To prove he could handle it. To prove he was good enough. to prove that if he just worked harder and responded faster and tried more intensely, he could somehow undo the deaths he carried, could somehow balance the scales. But scales cannot be balanced that way. You cannot bring back the dead by exhausting yourself trying to save the living. You cannot erase past failures by refusing to acknowledge present limitations. You cannot be a good paramedic if you destroy yourself trying to be a perfect one. And perfection, Marcus realized with startling clarity, was impossible. Had always been impossible. Would always be impossible. Jamie found him there, in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. "Hey, you look terrible. When was the last time you actually slept?" Marcus tried to remember. Could not. "I do not know." "That is what I thought." Jamie's voice was gentle. The same voice he used with scared patients, with people in shock. "Marcus, you have been running yourself into the ground for months, since that call in July, the Marina District. I know you think those 3 minutes mattered. I know you carry that. But brother, you have got to let it go. You have got to sleep. You have got to take care of yourself, or you are going to be the next casualty." "I saw them." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Down in the morgue, I saw all of them. Everyone we lost. They were there. They spoke to me." Jamie did not laugh, did not dismiss it, just nodded slowly. "Exhaustion does that. Makes the brain create things. Makes guilt take physical form. I have been there. Different circumstances. Same result. The mind trying to process trauma by making it concrete. Making it visible. Making it something you can confront instead of something that just eats you from the inside." Marcus turned to face his partner. "They told me it was not my fault. Told me I did everything I could. Told me I need to forgive myself. Then maybe you should listen to them. Even if they were just parts of your own mind talking to yourself. Maybe that is what you needed. Permission to be human. Permission to have limits. Permission to fail sometimes without it destroying you." The hospital intercom crackled. "Medic Unit 7. Respond to residential address on Lombard Street. 67-year-old male. Difficulty breathing. Code 2. Marcus looked at Jamie, then at the intercom, then back at his reflection. He looked exhausted, looked broken, looked like someone who needed to go home and sleep for 12 hours and maybe talk to a professional about the weight he was carrying. But there was a call. Someone who needed help. Someone who might live if they responded. Someone who might die if they did not. "I need to go home," Marcus said. "I need to sleep. I need to stop doing this to myself." Jamie nodded. "Yes, you do, but not right now. Right now, there is someone on Lombard Street who needs us. So we are going to respond to this call together. We are going to do our job. And then, when our shift ends in 4 hours, you are going to go home. You are going to sleep. And tomorrow, you are going to call employee assistance and talk to someone who can help you process this before it destroys you. Deal?" Marcus took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. "Deal." They walked to the ambulance together. Marcus climbed into the passenger seat. Jamie drove. The city streets were empty at this hour. Just them and the street lights and the distant sound of sirens from other emergencies in other neighborhoods. They arrived at the address on Lombard Street in 7 minutes. An older man, asthma attack, treatable, manageable. They gave him oxygen, administered medication. His breathing eased. His panic subsided. He would be fine. He would go home tomorrow. He would live. And Marcus realized something as they loaded the man into the ambulance. Realized it with perfect clarity. He had not hallucinated 12 bodies in a morgue. He had not experienced a supernatural event. He had experienced something far more common and far more dangerous. A complete psychological break brought on by exhaustion and unprocessed trauma, and the impossible standards he held himself to. His mind had created the confrontation he needed. Had given him permission he could not give himself. Had shown him truth through the only lens he could accept. Through the voices of the dead telling him what the living had been trying to say for months. You cannot save everyone, and trying to do so will kill you. Marcus called employee assistance the next afternoon. Slept 6 hours first. Woke up feeling both better and worse. Better because his body finally got rest. Worse because reality settled in with harsh clarity. He had experienced a complete break from reality in that morgue. Had hallucinated an entire scenario. had been so consumed by guilt and exhaustion that his mind created an elaborate intervention starring the dead patients he could not save. That was not normal. That was not healthy. That was a warning sign written in neon letters that he could no longer ignore. The counselor's name was Dr. Patricia Morris, 50-something. Kind eyes. The voice of someone who had heard every variation of trauma and never judged. Marcus told her everything. The Marina District call. The 3-minute delay for coffee. The elderly woman who died. The guilt that followed. The way he started working longer shifts. Taking every available overtime. Responding to every call with desperate intensity. Trying to save everyone to somehow compensate for the one he could not save. The one he believed he failed. And last night? Dr. Morris asked. In the morgue, Marcus described it. The humming. The bodies rising. The conversations. The revelations. All of it. When he finished, he waited for her to tell him he was losing his mind. That he needed medication. That he should not be working. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Not a pitying smile. An understanding one. Marcus, do you know what your subconscious did last night? It saved your life. Your mind recognized that you were destroying yourself. That the guilt was becoming toxic. That you were heading toward a complete breakdown or worse. So it created an experience dramatic enough to break through your defenses. It gave you permission to forgive yourself by framing that permission as coming from the people you thought you failed. That is not insanity. That is survival instinct. That is your own wisdom, trying desperately to save you from yourself. But I hallucinated. I saw things that were not there. You were awake for 31 hours. You were running on empty physically and emotionally. Your brain was struggling to process months of accumulated trauma. So yes, you hallucinated. But Marcus, the content of that hallucination matters. You did not see monsters. You did not see demons. You saw the people you tried to save, telling you that you did enough. Telling you to forgive yourself. Telling you to take care of yourself. Your subconscious knows what you need even when your conscious mind refuses to accept it. Over the following weeks, Marcus learned to recognize the patterns. The way guilt had driven him to excellence but also to self-destruction. The way he had weaponized compassion into a tool for punishment. The way he had turned every death into proof of his inadequacy instead of acceptance that death is part of life. Part of medicine. Part of being human in a world where bodies fail and time runs out and sometimes there is nothing anyone can do. He learned about secondary trauma, about compassion fatigue, about the psychological toll of emergency response work. He learned that most paramedics experienced some version of what he experienced, that carrying the dead was universal, that the guilt was common, that the solution was not working harder but working smarter, taking breaks, sleeping, talking to people who understood. Processing instead of suppressing, accepting instead of fighting. 3 months later, Marcus returned to the morgue, daytime this time, bringing down a patient who had died of natural causes. No emergency, no drama. Just the routine transfer of someone who had lived a long life and died peacefully. He stood in the same room where he had his break, looked at drawer 17. It was occupied now. Someone else's loved one. Someone else's end of the story. But the room felt different. Warmer somehow. Not physically, but emotionally. The oppressive weight was gone. The sense of accusation was gone. It was just a room, just a necessary part of the hospital, just a place where bodies were stored until families could say goodbye or autopsies could determine cause or arrangements could be made. Nothing supernatural, nothing terrifying, just part of the cycle. Marcus still carried the faces, still remembered the ones he could not save, but now he also carried the ones he did save. The teenager with the asthma attack that night on Lombard Street. The woman he delivered in her living room 2 weeks later. The construction worker who fell from a ladder and survived because Marcus recognized internal bleeding and got him to surgery in time. Dozens of saves in 3 months because he was sleeping, eating properly, taking care of himself, being human instead of trying to be superhuman. Fear had driven him into that morgue. Fear of failure. Fear of inadequacy. Fear that he was not good enough and never would be. But fear had also saved him, had forced the confrontation he needed, had broken him open so he could finally heal. Fear was not the enemy. Fear was the teacher, the mirror, the force that revealed truth when lies became too comfortable. Some nights, when Marcus finished his shift and walked through hospital corridors toward the exit, he thought he heard it again. That soft humming, that melody from drawer 17. But now it did not terrify him. Now it reminded him to rest, reminded him to forgive, reminded him that being a paramedic meant showing up and trying even when outcomes were uncertain, even when death might win, even when perfection was impossible. The dead do not rise to punish the living. They do not return to accuse or condemn. But sometimes when guilt grows heavy enough, when trauma cuts deep enough, when exhaustion pushes us to the edge, our minds create the confrontation we need. They give us the voices we need to hear. They show us the truth we are too afraid to acknowledge. And if we are fortunate, we listen, we learn, we change before it is too late. Marcus Chen still works as a paramedic, still responds to emergencies, still holds hands during final breaths, still fights to save lives, knowing he cannot save them all. But now he also sleeps. Now he also talks to Dr. Morris every other week. Now he also takes days off. Now he also accepts that being human with limitations is not failure. It is reality. And reality, once accepted, is far less terrifying than the impossible standards we create for ourselves. What voices do you hear in your quiet moments? What guilt do you carry? What impossible standards are destroying you from the inside? Share your story, because sometimes speaking our fears aloud is the first step toward releasing them. Sometimes admitting we cannot be perfect is the key to being good enough. Sometimes the dead we carry are not ghosts at all. They are teachers. And the lesson they teach is simple. You are human. Act accordingly. In the end, perhaps the real miracle was fear.